Imagine for a moment that you are standing in a circle with a group of friends. Everyone is laughing and telling stories. The sun is shining, and the atmosphere is warm and happy. But then, one person starts to speak. They tell a joke in English, and they do it perfectly. Their grammar is flawless. Their accent sounds just like a native speaker, and they use difficult vocabulary without even thinking. Everyone laughs at the joke. Everyone except you. You feel a sudden tightness in your chest. You feel your throat close up. Instead of listening to the joke, a voice in your head starts whispering to you. It says, "Why can't you speak like that? You have been studying for years, but you still make mistakes. You are not good enough." That feeling is heavy, and it is cold. It steals your happiness, and it freezes your tongue. If you have ever felt this way, you are not alone. In fact, you are in the right place. Hello, and welcome back to English in Fluency. I am your host, Alex, and I am so glad you have decided to join me today. Today we are going to talk about something very important. We are not just talking about grammar rules or vocabulary lists today. We are talking about the psychology of learning. We are talking about the thief of joy. We are talking about the dangerous habit of comparing yourself to others. This is a B1 level listening practice, so I will speak clearly and at a moderate pace. My goal is to help you improve your listening skills while we heal your mindset. I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose and let it out through your mouth. Let's relax and begin our story. To understand this topic better, I want to introduce you to a character named Sophie. Sophie is a bright and hardworking woman who lives in a busy city. She works as a graphic designer, which means she is very creative. She loves colors, shapes, and creating beautiful things. But Sophie has a secret frustration. She has been learning English for 3 years. She needs English for her job because her company has many international clients. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, after a long day of work, Sophie takes a bus to the city center to attend an intermediate English class. She is dedicated. She does her homework. She watches movies in English. But lately, Sophie has lost her motivation. She feels like she is stuck in mud, unable to move forward. The reason for Sophie's unhappiness has a name, and his name is Julian. Julian is a new student in Sophie's class. He joined only 2 months ago. Julian is charming and confident. He lived in London for 6 months a few years ago, and because of this, his speaking skills are very strong. When the teacher, whose name is Mrs. Higgins, asks a question, Julian's hand shoots up into the air immediately. He answers with long, complex sentences. He uses idioms and slang that Sophie has never heard before. Last Tuesday, the class was discussing travel. Mrs. Higgins asked the students to describe their favorite holiday. Sophie had prepared a nice answer in her head. She wanted to talk about a quiet trip to the mountains with her sister. She repeated the sentences in her mind to make sure the grammar was correct. She was ready. But before Sophie could speak, Mrs. Higgins pointed to Julian. Julian stood up and told a funny story about losing his passport in an airport in New York. He spoke fast. He made jokes. The whole class laughed and was impressed. Sophie looked at her notebook. Her sentences about the mountains suddenly seemed very simple and childish. She looked at her notes and felt ashamed. She thought that her English sounded like a textbook, while Julian's English sounded like a movie. When Mrs. Higgins finally looked at Sophie and asked her to share her story, Sophie froze. Her face turned red. She mumbled a few words, said she forgot her idea, and looked down at her desk. She did not speak for the rest of the class. On the bus ride home, she looked out the window at the city lights and thought about quitting the course. She told herself that she would never be as good as Julian, so there was no point in trying. Let's pause the story for a moment here. I want you to think about Sophie's situation. Can you relate to her? I know I can. When I was learning a second language, I had a classmate who seemed to learn 10 words for every one word I learned. It was incredibly frustrating. But here is the truth that Sophie does not see yet. Sophie is comparing her behind-the-scenes reality with Julian's highlight reel. She sees Julian's success in class, but she does not see his history. She does not know that Julian lived in London. She does not know that Julian maybe makes many mistakes in writing, or that he struggles with reading comprehension. She only sees the one thing he is better at, and she uses it to hurt herself. This is what we call unfair comparison. It is like an apple comparing itself to an orange and feeling bad because it is not orange. I want us to try a small exercise together right now. It is a listening and speaking exercise. I am going to say a sentence, and I want you to repeat it out loud, or quietly to yourself if you are on a bus or train. Are you ready? Here is the sentence. My journey is unique, and my progress is real. Let's try that again, a little slower. My journey is unique, and my progress is real. Good. Now, one more time, with feeling. My journey is unique, and my progress is real. By saying this, we are reminding our brains that we are on our own path. Sophie needs to realize this, but it will take some time. Let's return to Sophie and see what happened next. A few days later, it was Thursday. It was time for another English class. Sophie almost didn't go. She sat on her sofa, feeling tired. Her brain was finding excuses. She thought about how the traffic would be bad. She thought about how she had a headache. But deep down, she knew the real reason. She was afraid of feeling inferior to Julian again. However, Sophie is disciplined, so she grabbed her bag and went to class. When she arrived, the room was buzzing with energy. Mrs. Higgins had arranged the desks in pairs. This meant they would have to do conversation practice with a partner. Sophie's heart started beating fast. She prayed that she would not be partnered with Julian. She looked around the room, hoping to sit next to Maria, a quiet girl who spoke at the same speed as Sophie. But luck was not on Sophie's side that day. Mrs. Higgins clapped her hands and said that she would choose the partners to mix things up. "Sophie," Mrs. Higgins said with a smile, "why don't you sit with Julian today?" Sophie felt a cold shiver go down her spine. She slowly walked over to Julian's desk. Julian smiled broadly and said hello. He seemed very relaxed. The task was to discuss their plans for the weekend. Julian started immediately. He talked about going to a concert and meeting some friends for dinner. He asked Sophie, "So, what are you up to this weekend?" Sophie took a breath. She tried to focus. She said, "I am going to visit my parents. We will eat lunch in the garden." It was a correct sentence. It was clear. But immediately, her brain whispered, that was too simple. Julian nodded and asked, "Oh, that sounds lovely. Do you visit them often?" Sophie tried to answer more complexly. She wanted to use the present perfect continuous tense to impress him. She started to say, "I have been visiting them." But she got confused with the grammar. She stopped. She stuttered. She corrected herself 3 times. I have gone. I am going. She felt her face getting hot again. She looked at Julian, expecting him to laugh or look bored. But then something surprising happened. Julian leaned forward. He did not look bored. He looked sympathetic. He lowered his voice and said, "Hey, don't worry. English tenses are a nightmare, aren't they? I still get confused with the past perfect all the time." Sophie looked at him in shock. "You do?" she asked. Julian laughed. "Oh, absolutely," he said. "Last week at work, I sent an email to a client and I used the wrong word. I said I was exhausted when I meant to say I was excited. It was so embarrassing. I wanted to disappear." Sophie smiled. She couldn't help it. The image of the confident Julian making a mistake was funny, but it was also comforting. Julian continued, "You know, Sophie, I actually envy you." Sophie asked, "Why would you envy me? You speak so fluently." Julian shook his head. "I speak fast, yes, but I make a lot of grammar mistakes. I just speak over them so people don't notice. But when you speak, you are very precise. You think about the structure. I wish I had your patience. I always rush and make a mess." This conversation changed everything for Sophie. For weeks, she had been looking at Julian as a perfect statue of success. She thought he had no problems. She thought he was the destination she could never reach. But in reality, Julian was just another student. He had strengths, yes, specifically fluency and confidence. But he also had weaknesses, like accuracy and patience. Sophie had been comparing her weaknesses to his strengths. She had completely ignored her own strengths. She realized that her careful nature helped her write excellent emails, even if her speaking was slower. She realized that her journey was simply different, not worse. Let's take a moment to analyze the English in this situation. We often use the word envy. Julian said, "I envy you." This means he wants something that Sophie has. It is similar to jealousy, but often less negative. It implies admiration. Sophie was shocked because she didn't value her own skills. This is a common problem for B1 learners. When you reach the intermediate level, you know enough to understand how much you don't know. This is often called the intermediate plateau. You feel like you are not improving because the progress is slower than it was at the beginner level. At the beginner level, every new word feels like a huge victory. At the intermediate level, you learn new words, but you still feel like you can't express your true personality. This frustration makes you look at others and think they have the magic secret. I want to give you another practice prompt. I want you to think about one thing you are good at in English. Maybe you have good pronunciation. Maybe you have a large vocabulary for your job. Maybe you are good at understanding pop songs. Identify that one thing. Hold it in your mind. Now, say this sentence out loud. I have strengths that are valuable. Let's say it again. I have strengths that are valuable. When you focus on what you can do, rather than what you cannot do, your confidence grows. And confidence is the fuel for fluency. You cannot speak fluently if you are afraid of your own voice. Sophie went home that night feeling much lighter. The bus ride was different. She didn't look out the window feeling sad. Instead, she took out her notebook and reviewed the new vocabulary from the lesson. She didn't think about Julian. She thought about the weekend. She practiced the sentence in her head. I have been visiting my parents every Sunday for years. She smiled. She finally got the grammar right. It didn't matter that it took her an hour longer than Julian. She got there. She was running her own race. However, the story does not end here. Comparing ourselves to classmates is one thing, but there is a bigger monster that attacks our confidence. That monster is social media. A few weeks later, Sophie was scrolling through her phone during her lunch break. She followed several accounts that taught English. She saw a video of a girl who claimed to have learned English in just 3 months. The girl in the video was speaking incredibly fast, giving tips and saying that if you study for 10 minutes a day, you can be fluent in 90 days. Sophie looked at the video and felt a familiar sinking feeling in her stomach. 3 months? Sophie had been studying for 3 years. She started to panic. Was she doing something wrong? Was she stupid? Was her brain broken? The video had thousands of likes and comments. People were saying, "Wow, amazing," and "I wish I was like you." Sophie felt like a failure again. She closed the app and put her phone face down on the table. She lost her appetite for lunch. This is the danger of the internet illusion. On the internet, people usually share only their victories. They do not share the hundreds of hours of struggle. That girl in the video might have studied for hours every single day. Or maybe she already spoke a similar language. Or maybe she was reading from a script and did 50 takes before posting the video. Sophie compared her reality to a carefully edited performance. This leads us to a very important concept in our journey to fluency: realistic expectations. If you expect to run a marathon without training, you will hurt yourself. If you expect to speak C2 level English after watching a few videos, you will be disappointed. Sophie needed to reset her expectations. She needed a reality check. She decided to speak to Mrs. Higgins after the next class. She wanted to ask an expert about this 3-month fluency idea. When the next class finished, Sophie stayed behind. Mrs. Higgins was erasing the whiteboard. Sophie approached her desk nervously. "Mrs. Higgins," she asked, "can I ask you a question?" The teacher turned around and smiled warm. "Of course, Sophie. What is it?" Sophie hesitated, then asked, "Is it really possible to become fluent in 3 months? I saw a video, and I feel like I am very slow." Mrs. Higgins sighed and put down the eraser. She looked at Sophie with kind eyes. She said, "Sophie, learning a language is like growing a tree. You can buy plastic flowers, and they look perfect instantly. But a real tree takes time. It needs roots. It needs rain. It needs sun. And sometimes, in winter, it looks like it is not growing at all. But under the ground, the roots are getting stronger." Mrs. Higgins continued, "Those videos are selling a dream. They are not selling reality. You are building a real tree, Sophie. You are building deep roots. Your English will last a lifetime because you are working hard for it. Do not compare your oak tree to someone else's plastic flower." This metaphor struck Sophie hard. She loved nature, so she understood this perfectly. She realized that she was building something permanent and real. She thanked Mrs. Higgins and walked out of the classroom. The air outside felt fresh. She took a deep breath. She decided right then and there to unfollow accounts that made her feel bad. She decided to curate her feed to only include teachers who were honest, encouraging, and realistic. This is a very practical step you can take too. I want you to look at your digital environment. Does it make you feel inspired, or does it make you feel inadequate? If an account makes you feel like you are not enough, delete it. Protect your mental energy. Your energy should go into learning, not into feeling guilty. This is part of focusing on your own journey. It is about protecting your garden from weeds. Now, we have talked about classmates and we have talked about social media. But there is one more person we often compare ourselves to, and this person is perhaps the most difficult one to ignore. Do you know who it is? It is our past self, or rather, an idealized version of who we think we should be by now. Sophie often thought, by the time I am 30, I should be fluent. She had set a deadline for herself. Deadlines are good for projects, but they can be toxic for language learning. Language is not a project with a finish line. It is a lifestyle. Sophie had a presentation coming up at work. She had to present a design concept to a new client. The client was from Germany, and the common language would be English. This was Sophie's big test. She prepared her slides. They were beautiful. But she was terrified of the speaking part. She practiced in front of her mirror. "Good morning. This design represents," she said to her reflection. She stumbled. She forgot the word for bold. She got frustrated. "Why can't I remember this simple word?" she shouted at the mirror. She was angry at herself. She was comparing herself to a fantasy version of Sophie who never forgets words. But then she remembered Mrs. Higgins's advice about the tree. She took a breath. She looked at her reflection and said, "It is okay to forget. I will just write the word down." She prepared note cards. She accepted that she might make mistakes, and that was okay. The day of the presentation arrived. Sophie stood in the conference room. The client sat at the big table. Her boss was there too. Sophie's hands were shaking a little. She began to speak. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming." Her voice was a bit shaky but clear. She moved through the slides. Midway through, she wanted to explain a color choice. She wanted to say vibrant, but the word disappeared from her mind. Panic rose in her throat. She looked at Julian. No, Julian wasn't there. She looked at the client. She paused. She didn't apologize. She didn't cry. She simply used a different word. "This color is very strong and bright," she said. The client nodded. They understood. They didn't care that she didn't use the word vibrant. They cared about the design. Sophie finished the presentation. The client smiled and said, "Great work. We love the concept." Sophie walked out of that meeting feeling 10 feet tall. She had not been perfect. She had made mistakes. But she had communicated. She had succeeded. She realized that fluency is not about perfection. Fluency is about connection. It is about getting your idea from your head into someone else's head. If you can do that, you are winning. Sophie stopped comparing herself to the perfect Sophie in her head and started celebrating the real Sophie who just closed a deal with a German client. This is the mindset I want you to adopt. Stop looking at the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Instead, look at the gap between where you were yesterday and where you are today. If you know one more word today than you did yesterday, you are winning. If you understood 50% of this podcast, you are winning. So, as we see Sophie succeed at work, it's important to remember that confidence is not a straight line. It goes up and down. Let's return to Sophie's life and explore a new challenge, and perhaps a challenge you have faced too. The fear of your accent and the fear of social conversation. It is a rainy Saturday afternoon. After her success at work, Sophie feels brave. She decides to do something she has avoided for a long time. She decides to attend a language exchange meetup at a local cafe. This is an event where people from all over the world come together to practice English and other languages. Usually, Sophie would be too scared to go. She would worry that her English isn't ready for casual conversation. Formal presentations are one thing, but chatting with strangers in a noisy cafe? That is a different level of difficulty. She arrives at the cafe. The windows are steamed up from the warmth inside. She opens the door, and the smell of roasted coffee beans hits her nose. But so does the noise. It is loud. There are about 30 people standing in groups, holding cups and laughing. The sound of English, mixed with other languages, fills the air. Sophie feels a sudden urge to turn around and leave. The voice in her head returns. It says, "Everyone here sounds so natural. You will sound stiff. You will sound like a foreigner." Her hands start to sweat. She clutches her bag tight. But she remembers her promise to herself. Focus on your own journey. She takes a deep breath and walks to the counter to order a tea. While she is waiting for her tea, she observes the room. She sees a group of people near the window. They are laughing loudly. In the center of the group is a man named Matteo. Matteo is animated. He is using his hands to tell a story. Sophie listens closely. She notices something interesting. Matteo has a very strong accent. He does not sound like a native English speaker at all. His R sounds are rolling, and his vowels are different from the standard pronunciation she hears on audio tapes. He makes some small grammar mistakes too. He says people is instead of people are. But here is the amazing thing. Nobody cares. Everyone is leaning in. Everyone is smiling. Everyone understands him perfectly. Sophie is confused. She always thought that to be socially successful in English, you had to hide your accent. She thought you had to sound exactly like a British or American person. But Matteo is breaking all her rules. He is loud, he is happy, and he is authentically himself. Sophie gets her tea and, feeling a burst of curiosity, walks over to the edge of Matteo's group. Matteo sees her and immediately waves her over. "Hey!" he shouts cheerfully. "Come join us. We are talking about the worst food we have ever eaten on holiday. What is your name?" Sophie smiles shyly. "I am Sophie," she says. Matteo introduces himself and the others. There is a girl from Japan, a guy from Brazil, and a woman from France. It is a mix of accents, a soup of sounds. Sophie relaxes a little. She realizes that in this circle, perfect English does not exist. There is only shared English. English is the bridge they are all walking on to meet each other. Matteo asks Sophie, "So, Sophie, tell us. What is the worst food you ever had?" Sophie thinks. She forgets to worry about her grammar. She remembers a trip to the beach, where she ate a sandwich full of sand. She starts to tell the story. "I was 5 years old," she begins. "I dropped my sandwich. But I was so hungry, I ate it anyway. It was crunchy." The group laughs. Matteo slaps his knee. "Crunchy! That is horrible!" He laughs. Sophie laughs too. She realizes something profound. They laughed at her story, not at her English. Her English was just the vehicle for the humor. Let's pause the scene here and talk about accents. This is a huge topic for B1 learners. Many of you feel ashamed of your accent. You think it marks you as an outsider. You spend hours trying to eliminate it. But look at Matteo. His accent is strong, yet he is the most popular person in the room. Why? Because he owns it. He is not apologizing for being who he is. Your accent is part of your history. It tells people where you are from. It tells people that you are brave enough to speak a second language. I want you to repeat a new mantra with me. This is very important for your psychological growth. Are you ready? Repeat after me. My accent is my identity, and clarity is my goal. Let's say it again. My accent is my identity, and clarity is my goal. Notice that I said clarity, not native accent. As long as people can understand you, your English is good. If you speak clearly, you are succeeding. Do not waste energy trying to be someone else. Be the English-speaking version of you. Back at the cafe, the conversation moves on to movies. This is where Sophie hits a new bump in the road. The group starts talking about a popular American TV show. Everyone is quoting lines from it and laughing. Sophie has tried to watch this show before. She tried watching it without subtitles because she read online that real learners don't use subtitles. But she couldn't understand anything. The actors spoke too fast, and they mumbled. When she watched it, she felt stupid. Now, standing in the cafe, she feels the fear coming back. What if they ask her a specific question about the show? She doesn't want to admit she didn't understand it. The woman from France turns to Sophie. "Do you like the main character?" she asks. Sophie's heart races. She has two choices. She can lie and say yes, pretending to be part of the group. Or she can be honest and risk looking bad at English. Sophie remembers Mrs. Higgins. She remembers the tree with the deep roots. A tree does not lie about its leaves. Sophie decides to be honest. Actually, she says, "To be honest, I find that show really difficult to understand. They speak too fast for me. I usually have to watch with subtitles, or I miss the jokes." Sophie braces herself for judgment. She expects them to look down on her, but instead, the group nods in agreement. "Oh, my playing God," says the girl from Japan. "Me too. I have to watch it with English subtitles always. If I turn them off, it sounds like noise." Matteo agrees. "I watch it twice," he says. "Once with subtitles to understand the story, and once without to practice listening. But it is very hard. It is slang from the street. It is not classroom English." Sophie feels a massive weight lift off her shoulders. She is not alone. Even these people, who seemed so confident, struggle with listening to fast native speech. This is the comparison trap again. Sophie assumed that because they could speak well, they could understand everything perfectly. But listening and speaking are different skills. You can be a great talker, but still struggle with the fast movie. This moment teaches us about the myth of native speed. Many learners torture themselves because they cannot understand a Hollywood movie instantly. But you must remember that movies often use mumbled speech, slang, and background noise. It is the hardest level of listening. It is okay to use subtitles. In fact, using English subtitles is a fantastic way to bridge the gap between reading and listening. It helps your brain connect the sound of the word to the shape of the word. Let's try a listening visualization exercise right now to help with this anxiety. I want you to close your eyes if you are in a safe place. Imagine your brain is a muscle. When you listen to difficult English, that muscle is lifting a heavy weight. It might shake. It might feel tired. That is not a sign of weakness. That is a sign of growth. If you understand everything easily, you are not learning anything new. You are just reviewing what you already know. Confusion is the feeling of learning. Let me say that again because it is vital. Confusion is the feeling of learning. When you feel confused, do not panic. Smile. Tell yourself, "My brain is working hard right now. I am getting stronger." Sophie left the cafe that evening feeling energized. She had spoken to strangers. She had admitted her struggles. And she had realized that everyone is in the same boat. We are all rowing together across the ocean of language. She walked to the bus stop, humming a tune. She took out her phone. She didn't open social media. Instead, she opened a voice recording app. She wanted to record her thoughts while they were fresh. This is a great habit for you to start, too. An audio journal. She pressed record and started speaking to herself. Today I went to a cafe. I was scared, but I met Mateo. He has a funny accent, but he is cool. I learned that it is okay to use subtitles. I am proud of myself. When she played the recording back, she heard her own voice. Usually, she hated hearing her voice, but this time, she listened with kindness. She heard the pauses. She heard the small grammar slips. But she also heard the emotion. She heard the successful communication of a story. She decided she would keep this recording and listen to it in a month to see if she had improved. The next challenge for Sophie came a week later, and it was a challenge of vocabulary envy. Sophie was reading a book in English. It was a novel recommended for intermediate learners. She was enjoying the story. But then, she met a friend for lunch. This friend, let's call her Clara, was also learning English. Clara loved to show off big words. During lunch, Clara said, "The weather today is absolutely atrocious, isn't it?" Sophie blinked. Atrocious? She knew the word bad. She knew terrible. But atrocious? Sophie felt small again. She thought, my vocabulary is so basic. I sound like a child. Clara sounds like a professor. Sophie went home and did something many of us do. She grabbed a dictionary and started trying to memorize long lists of advanced words. She wrote down ubiquitous, ephemeral, cacophony. She tried to force these words into her sentences. The next day at work, she sent an email. She wanted to say, "The meeting was noisy," but instead she wrote, "The meeting was a cacophony." Her boss replied, "What do you mean? Was it loud?" Sophie realized she had used the word unnaturally. She had focused on being fancy instead of being clear. This brings us to the vocabulary trap. Comparing your vocabulary size to others is dangerous. A huge vocabulary is useless if you don't know how to use the words naturally. It is like having a toolbox full of expensive tools, but not knowing how to build a chair. It is better to have a hammer and a saw and build a solid chair than to have a laser cutter and build nothing. Sophie realized her mistake when she spoke to Mrs. Higgins again. Mrs. Higgins laughed gently when Sophie told her about the cacophony email. "Sophie," Mrs. Higgins said, "imagine a house. The bricks are the basic words like house, run, eat, good. You need thousands of bricks to build a strong house. The fancy words like atrocious or cacophony are the decorations. They are the paintings on the wall. You cannot build a house out of paintings. If you try, the house will fall down. Focus on your bricks first. Master the common words. Use them flexibly. That is true fluency." This advice changed Sophie's study plan. She stopped trying to memorize the dictionary. Instead, she focused on collocations. Collocations are words that naturally go together. Instead of just learning meeting, she learned hold a meeting, attend a meeting, schedule a meeting. This made her English sound much more natural than when she was trying to use big, strange words. She realized that fluency is not about the rarity of the words you use, but the flow of how you connect them. Let's practice this concept. I am going to give you a simple word. Make. It is a very common B1 word, but it is powerful. You can make a mistake. You can make a decision. You can make a promise. You can make an effort. You can make a phone call. Knowing these combinations is far more valuable than knowing the word for a specific type of rare butterfly. I want you to think of 3 things you made this week. Did you make dinner? Did you make a plan? Did you make time for English? Say them out loud. I made. As the weeks turned into months, Sophie's mindset shifted completely. She stopped looking at Julian to see if he was ahead of her. She stopped looking at Clara to see if she knew more words. She started looking at herself. She created a success journal. Every Friday, she wrote down 3 things she did well in English. They were small things. I ordered coffee without stuttering. I understood the lyrics to a pop song. I learned a new phrasal verb. This journal became her evidence. When the bad days came, and they still came, she opened the journal. She saw the proof of her progress. One evening, Sophie was walking home through the park. She saw a tourist looking at a map, looking very lost and confused. The tourist approached Sophie. "Excuse me," the tourist said in broken English. "Train? Station? Where?" In the past, Sophie might have panicked. She might have worried she would give the wrong directions or that her accent would be bad. But this is the new Sophie. She smiled. She didn't think about grammar. She didn't think about Julian. She only thought about helping. "Go straight," Sophie said, pointing her hand. "Turn left at the big statue. Then it is on your right. It is 5 minutes." The tourist's face lit up. "Thank you. Thank you very much," the tourist said. Sophie watched them walk away. She felt a warm glow in her chest. She had connected. She had helped. She had used her English to solve a problem in the real world. That was the point. That was always the point. Not to be the best in the class. Not to impress a teacher. But to connect with another human being. She realized then that comparing herself to others was like a runner in a race looking sideways at the other runners. If you look sideways, you slow down. You might even trip and fall. But if you look forward, at your own finish line, you keep moving. Your finish line is not a certificate. It is the ability to live your life in English. But our story isn't quite finished yet. Sophie has conquered her fear of classmates, social media, accents, and vocabulary. But there is one final frontier. It is the fear of the plateau. The time when you feel like you are working hard, but nothing is happening. We briefly mentioned this before, but now Sophie is going to live through it. It has been 6 months. The excitement of the new class has faded. The grammar is getting harder. She is studying conditionals and passive voice. She feels tired. She feels like she is waking up every day and running on a treadmill, staying in the same place. One night, she throws her textbook across the room. "I am done," she says to the empty apartment. "I am just not getting better." She feels the tears stinging her eyes. This is the burnout. It happens to almost every B1 learner. You have learned the basics, but the advanced level seems miles away. The gap feels impossible to bridge. Sophie decides to take a break. She stops going to class for a week. She stops listening to podcasts. She stops everything. During this week of silence, she notices something. She misses it. She misses the sound of the language. She misses the mental challenge. She realizes that English has become a part of her routine, a part of who she is. She isn't just learning English. She is a bilingual person in training. She decides to return, but with a new approach. She realizes she needs to make English fun again. She has been treating it like a job. She needs to treat it like a hobby. She decides to combine English with something she already loves: cooking. Sophie loves to cook. She finds a YouTube channel of a British chef. She decides to bake a cake following the English instructions. She isn't studying. She isn't writing down words. She is just baking. "Whisk the eggs," the chef says. Sophie whisks. "Fold in the flour," the chef says. Sophie learns what fold means by doing it. The cake comes out delicious. Sophie eats a slice and smiles. She learned English without studying. She learned by doing. This is the secret to overcoming the plateau. Stop studying English and start using English to do things you enjoy. Do you like football? Watch matches with English commentary. Do you like knitting? Join an English knitting forum. Do you like gaming? Play on international servers. When you link English to pleasure, the comparison stops. You are too busy having fun to worry if Julian is having more fun than you. As we move forward, I want you to think about your hobbies. What do you love to do? How can you add English to it? If you love yoga, do a yoga class in English on YouTube. If you love history, listen to a history podcast. This is how you make the journey your own. You customize it. No one else has your combination of interests. Therefore, no one else has your English journey. It is unique to you. Sophie returned to class the following week. She felt fresh. She told Mrs. Higgins about the cake. Mrs. Higgins beamed. "That is it, Sophie," she said. "You have found the key. Language is not a subject to be mastered. It is a tool to be used." Julian was there too. He looked tired. He told Sophie he was stressed about an exam. Sophie felt a wave of compassion for him. She didn't feel inferior anymore. She saw that he had his own struggles. She offered to share her cake with him. They sat together, eating cake, not as competitors, but as friends. Sophie finally understood. The only person she needed to be better than was the Sophie of 6 months ago. And when she looked back at that frightened, shy girl who couldn't say a sentence without apologizing, she knew she had won. She was free. Now, let's dig even deeper into the mechanics of fluency. Connection is more important than perfection, but the journey to fluency is long, and there are still mountains to climb. We are going to talk about a psychological trick that plays games with our minds. Psychologists call it the spotlight effect. Have you ever felt that, when you speak English, everyone stops what they are doing to judge you? You feel like you are on a stage with a bright spotlight shining directly on your face. You think everyone sees every tiny mistake. You think everyone is analyzing your grammar. This feeling is very common for B1 learners. But here is the secret. The spotlight does not exist. It is an illusion. Most people are too busy thinking about themselves to think about your grammar. They are thinking about their lunch, their job, or their own insecurities. Sophie was about to learn this lesson in a very practical way. A few weeks after her cake-baking breakthrough, Sophie's company hired a new intern. Her name was Elena. Elena was young, very talented at drawing, but very shy. She had just moved to the city from a small town in a different country. Her English level was A2, high beginner. She knew the basics, but she was terrified of speaking. On Elena's first day, the boss asked Sophie to look after her. "Sophie," the boss said, "please show Elena how we answer the client emails." Sophie felt a sudden surge of responsibility. Usually, Sophie felt like the learner, the one who needed help. Now, suddenly, she was the teacher. Sophie sat down next to Elena. Elena looked terrified. Her hands were shaking as she hovered over the keyboard. "I am sorry," Elena whispered. "My English is very bad. I am afraid to make a mistake." Sophie looked at Elena and saw a mirror image of herself from 3 years ago. She saw the fear. She saw the comparison. She knew exactly what Elena was feeling. And in that moment, something shifted in Sophie's brain. She stopped worrying about her own English. She stopped worrying if she was as good as Julian. All she wanted to do was help Elena feel safe. Sophie smiled warmly. She said, "Elena, listen to me. Do not worry. I make mistakes all the time. Last week I told a client the wrong color. It happens. We will fix it together." Sophie started to explain the email templates. She spoke slowly and clearly. She used simple words so Elena could understand. She realized that she was speaking English for 2 hours straight without feeling anxious. Why? Because her focus was not on herself. Her focus was on Elena. When you focus on helping someone else, your ego disappears. And when your ego disappears, the fear of comparison disappears with it. This is a powerful technique for you. If you feel nervous about your English, try to find someone who knows less than you and help them. It could be a child, a younger sibling, or a beginner in a chat room. When you become the helper, you realize how much you actually know. You realize that B1 is actually a very high level compared to 0. You stop looking up at the people above you, and you start looking back to pull others up. This gives you perspective. It shows you how far you have climbed up the mountain. During that week with Elena, Sophie realized she had developed a specific skill without knowing it. She had developed the skill of paraphrasing. When Elena didn't understand a difficult word, Sophie didn't panic. She didn't reach for a dictionary. She simply explained it using easier words. For example, the boss used the word deadline. Elena looked confused. Sophie didn't say, "Oh, you don't know that word?" Instead, she said, "A deadline is the time when we must finish the work. If we finish after this time, it is too late." Elena understood immediately. Paraphrasing is a superpower for B1 learners. Many learners get stuck when they forget a specific word. They stop speaking. They freeze. They say, "I forgot the word," and the conversation dies. But a fluent speaker doesn't stop. They go around the wall. If they forget the word for umbrella, they say, "The thing you hold to stop the rain." If they forget the word for wallet, they say, "The small bag for my money." This is what Sophie was doing naturally. She was keeping the flow of communication alive. I want us to practice this right now. It is a game called Describe It, Don't Say It. I am going to give you a word, but I want you to pretend you have forgotten it. You must describe it using simple sentences. The word is refrigerator. Imagine you are in a shop and you need to buy one, but the word is gone. What do you say? You might say, "The big machine in the kitchen that keeps food cold," or "The box where I put milk and cheese." Try it. Say a description out loud. It is the machine that... Let's try another one. The word is teacher. If you forget this word, what can you say? You can say, "The person who helps students learn," or "The person who works in a school." Do you see? You do not need to know every word in the dictionary to be fluent. You just need to be flexible. Sophie taught this to Elena. She told Elena, "If you don't know the word, paint a picture with other words." Elena relaxed. The atmosphere in the office became lighter. Now, let's move to a more advanced listening technique that Sophie started using to improve her pronunciation and intonation. She noticed that while she could speak, she sometimes sounded a bit like a robot. Her rhythm was flat. She wanted to sound more musical, like Mateo or Mrs. Higgins. She discovered a technique called shadowing. Shadowing is not just repeating after someone. It is much more active. It is acting. It is copying the emotion, the speed, the pauses, and the melody of the speaker. Sophie started doing this with her favorite podcast. She would take a short clip, maybe just 30 seconds. She would listen to it once to understand the meaning. Then, she would listen again and try to speak at the same time as the speaker. Not after, but simultaneously. It was hard at first. Her tongue got twisted. She felt silly talking to herself in her room, but she persisted. She tried to match the singer's voice. If the speaker's voice went up at the end of a question, Sophie's voice went up. If the speaker whispered, Sophie whispered. After a few weeks of shadowing, something magical happened. Her brain started to absorb the natural patterns of English. She stopped translating from her native language in her head. She started to feel where the stress should be in a sentence. For example, in the sentence, "I didn't say he stole the money," the meaning changes depending on which word you stress. If you say, "I didn't say he stole the money," it implies someone else stole it. If you say, "I didn't say he stole the money," it implies he maybe borrowed it. Sophie learned this nuance through shadowing. Let's try a very short shadowing exercise together. I am going to say a sentence with a specific emotion. I want you to say it exactly as I do. Matches my speed and my tone. The sentence is, "I can't believe we actually did it." I am going to say it with surprise and happiness. Listen. I can't believe we actually did it. Now you try. Imagine you just won a prize. I can't believe we actually did it. Now, let's change the emotion. Let's say it with exhaustion and relief, like you just finished a very long run. Listen. I can't believe we actually did it. The pauses are longer. The breath is heavy. Try it. I can't believe we actually did it. This flexibility is what makes you sound human and fluent. Sophie practiced this every morning for 10 minutes. It was her gym for her mouth muscles. One evening, Sophie and Julian were walking to the bus stop after class. They had become good friends since the day they ate cake together. Julian was talking about a movie he saw. He was speaking fast, as usual. Sophie was listening, nodding, and throwing in small comments like, "Really?" and "No way." Then, Julian asked her a difficult question. He asked, "Sophie, what do you think is the biggest problem with the education system in our country?" This was a heavy topic. In the past, Sophie would have panicked. She would have tried to form a perfect thesis statement in her head. She would have been silent for 10 seconds, which makes the conversation awkward. But this time, she used another trick she had learned. Filler phrases. Filler phrases are the sounds and words natives use to buy time while they think. Words like, "well," "you know," "let me see." That's a tough question. Actually. Sophie didn't jump into the answer. She took a breath and said, "Wow, that is a really interesting question, Julian. Let me think about that for a second. I suppose if I had to choose one thing, I would say..." By using these fillers, she kept the ball of conversation in the air. She didn't drop it. She gave her brain time to find the vocabulary. She sounded natural. She sounded relaxed. Julian listened to her opinion. She spoke about how schools focus too much on tests. When she finished, Julian nodded thoughtfully. "I agree," he said. "You explained that really well, Sophie. You sounded so comfortable." Sophie beamed. That word, comfortable, meant more to her than perfect. Comfortable meant she was at home in the language. She wasn't a visitor anymore. This leads us to a crucial point about the fear of silence. Many B1 learners are terrified of silence. They think that if they stop talking for 1 second, they have failed. So they rush. They stutter. They say, for too long. But silence can be powerful. If you are confident, a short pause shows you are thinking. It shows you take the question seriously. Do not be afraid to pause. Just signal that you are thinking. You can even say, "I am just searching for the right word." People will wait. They are not timing you with a stopwatch. Let's incorporate a practice prompt here regarding filler words. I want you to build a thinking arsenal. This is a collection of phrases you have ready for when your brain freezes. I want you to memorize 3 phrases today. Phrase 1, "That is a good point. Let me see." Phrase 2, "How can I put this?" Phrase 3, "It is on the tip of my tongue." Whenever you get stuck, pull one of these weapons from your arsenal. It stops the panic. It keeps you in control. As the season changed from autumn to winter, Sophie faced a new type of challenge. It was the challenge of listening fatigue. She had been working hard. She was shadowing. She was helping Elena. She was working. One day, she turned on the news in English. The news anchor was talking about global politics. There were many numbers, names of countries, and economic terms. Sophie's brain just shut down. She heard the words, but they didn't mean anything. It was like white noise. She felt a headache coming on. She turned off the TV, feeling defeated. "I still can't understand the news," she thought. "I am still not good enough." But the next day, she spoke to Matteo at the language exchange. She told him about the news. Matteo laughed. "Sophie," he said, "I don't even understand the news in my native language half the time. It is boring and complicated. Why are you forcing yourself to listen to things you hate?" This was a revelation. Sophie thought she should listen to the news to be a serious learner. But she hated politics. She loved art, design, and psychology. Matteo gave her advice that I want to give to you. Narrow listening. Instead of trying to listen to everything, news, sports, science, comedy, pick one topic that you truly love. Become an expert in that one topic in English. Sophie decided to focus on design podcasts. Because she was a designer, she already knew the context. She knew the concepts. This made the English easier to understand. She learned words like typography, layout, aesthetic, and user interface. Because she was interested, she listened for longer. Because she listened for longer, her listening stamina improved. After a month of listening to design podcasts, she tried a psychology podcast. It was easier. Then she tried a general interview podcast. It was easier. By narrowing her focus first, she built a strong foundation. Don't try to drink the whole ocean. Just learn to swim in your own swimming pool first. I want you to identify your pool. What is the one topic you could read about for hours in your own language? Is it football, fashion, technology, gardening, true crime? Find a podcast or a YouTube channel in English about that specific topic. Do not listen to business news if you hate business. Your brain will reject it. Input must be compelling. It must be interesting to you. Let's check back in with Sophie and Elena. It had been 2 months since Elena started. Elena was doing much better. She was answering emails independently. One day, Elena came to Sophie's desk with a small gift. It was a drawing. It was a sketch of Sophie, but she looked like a superhero with a cape. At the bottom, it said, "Thank you for being my voice until I found mine." Sophie looked at the drawing and teared up. She realized that her English journey wasn't just about her. It was about who she could be for others. Her struggle had made her a better teacher. Her difficulties had made her more empathetic. If she had been perfect, like Julian from day one, she might not have understood Elena's fear. She might have been impatient. But because Sophie knew the struggle, she was the perfect mentor. This turns your weakness into a strength. Your struggle with English is not a badge of shame. It is a badge of honor. It means you are fighting. It means you are growing. And one day, you will use that experience to help someone else. So, we have covered the spotlight effect, the power of helping beginners, the technique of shadowing, the use of filler phrases, and the strategy of narrow listening. We are building a complete toolkit for your fluency. But there is one final piece of the puzzle we haven't touched yet. It is the most subtle, but perhaps the most important. It is the transition from translating to thinking in English. Right now, you might still be translating. You hear dog, you think of the word in your language, and then you see the image of the dog. We want to cut the middleman. We want dog, image of dog. How do we do this? We do this through immersion, but not just passive immersion, active immersion. Sophie decided to change her environment. She changed the language on her phone to English. It was annoying at first. She couldn't find the settings menu. But after 2 days, she learned words like notifications, storage, privacy, and accessibility without studying. They were just part of her life. She started writing her grocery list in English. She put sticky notes on objects in her house. On the mirror, she wrote, "You are beautiful." On the coffee machine, she wrote, "Fuel." This constant visual reminder kept her brain in English mode. It is difficult to compare yourself to others when you are just living your life. You don't compare yourself to others when you are brushing your teeth or making coffee. If English becomes part of those mundane activities, the anxiety disappears. It just becomes a tool, like a toothbrush or a spoon. Let's engage in a small visualization to prepare for the final part of our story. I want you to imagine your average day. Waking up, eating breakfast, commuting, working, relaxing. Now, imagine a version of that day where the soundtrack is English. You listen to music with English lyrics while brushing your teeth. You listen to a podcast on the bus. You read a recipe in English for dinner. You watch a series in English before bed. This isn't studying. This is living. The more you integrate English into the cracks of your day, the less scary it becomes. We are nearing the end of our story with Sophie, but she has one final major test to face. A test that involves Julian, Mrs. Higgins, and a surprise event that will challenge everything she has learned about confidence. It is the end-of-year speech night. Every student has to give a 5-minute speech on a topic of their choice, in front of the whole school. In the past, Sophie would have called in sick. She would have quit the course. But this is the new Sophie. The Sophie who mentors Elena. The Sophie who shadows podcasts. the Sophie who knows that mistakes are just stepping stones. She signed up, but the topic she chose surprised everyone. She didn't choose my holiday or my job. She chose a topic that was close to her heart. Why being a slow learner is a superpower. It is the night of the end-of-year speech night. The air in the school hall is thick with anticipation. There are about 50 people in the audience. There are other students, teachers, and even some family members. The lights are dimmed, and a single spotlight shines on the wooden stage. Sophie is sitting in the front row. Her hands are resting on her lap. Are they shaking? A little bit. But this time, the shaking is not from terror. It is from adrenaline. It is the energy of a runner waiting for the starting gun. Beside her sits Julian. Julian looks confident as always, wearing a smart shirt and checking his notes. But Sophie notices something she never noticed before. Julian is tapping his foot nervously. He is biting his lip. He is human. He is nervous too. This realization makes Sophie smile. Everyone is fighting their own battle. The event begins. Mrs. Higgins walks onto the stage to welcome everyone. She speaks about the hard work of the semester. She talks about how language is a bridge between cultures. Then, she calls the first speaker. It is Julian. Julian walks up the stairs to the stage. He takes the microphone. His speech is titled, "The Adventures of a Global Traveler." He speaks well. He tells funny stories about London and New York. He uses big words like cosmopolitan and extraordinary. The audience laughs. They clap. In the past, Sophie would have been sinking into her chair right now. She would have been thinking, I can't follow that. He is too good. My speech is boring. But tonight, Sophie listens with a different ear. She enjoys his speech. She admires his energy. But she does not want to be him. She knows that his style is fast and energetic. Her style is slow and thoughtful. Both are good. An orchestra needs violins and it needs drums. You cannot have an orchestra with only drums. Sophie is ready to play her own instrument. Mrs. Higgins returns to the microphone. "Thank you, Julian. That was wonderful," she says. "And now, please welcome our next speaker, Sophie, with her talk titled, Why Being a Slow Learner is a Superpower." There is polite applause. Sophie stands up. Her legs feel a little heavy. She walks up the stairs. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. She stands behind the microphone. The light is bright in her eyes. She can't see the faces in the audience clearly, but she knows Elena is there. She knows Mrs. Higgins is there. She takes a deep breath, pauses for 3 seconds, using the power of silence, and begins. "Hello, everyone," Sophie says. Her voice is steady. "For a long time, I hated my English. I looked at people who learned fast, and I felt jealous. I felt like a snail in a race of rabbits. I wanted to be fast. I wanted to be perfect. But recently, I learned something important. The snail sees things the rabbit misses. When you move fast, the world is a blur. When you move slow, you see every detail. The room is very quiet. People are listening. They are leaning forward. This is not a standard speech about my holiday. This is a story from the heart." Sophie continues, "Because I learn slowly, I have to fight for every word. When I learn a new word, I don't just memorize it. I make friends with it. I use it. I cherish it. My roots are deep. I realized that my struggle is not a sign of stupidity. It is a sign of resilience. To all the slow learners out there, I want to say this. Do not rush. Enjoy the view. Your English is being built with stone, not with straw. It will last forever." Sophie looks out into the dark room. She imagines she is speaking directly to her past self, the sad girl on the bus. She concludes her speech. So, stop comparing your Chapter 1 to someone else's Chapter 20. Run your own race. Be proud of your accent, your mistakes, and your journey. Thank you. For a second, there is total silence. Then, the applause starts. It is not polite applause. It is loud. It is warm. Sophie sees Mrs. Higgins in the front row, wiping a tear from her eye. She sees Elena standing up and cheering. Even Julian is clapping enthusiastically. Sophie smiles, a real, genuine smile that reaches her eyes. She walks off the stage. She didn't use the most complex grammar. She didn't use the biggest vocabulary. But she connected. She touched people's hearts. She was fluent in emotion. After the event, there is a small party with drinks and snacks. People come up to Sophie. A woman she doesn't know approaches her. "Excuse me," the woman says. "I just wanted to say thank you. My husband is from Italy, and I have been trying to learn Italian for years. I felt so stupid because I am slow. Your speech made me feel valid. Thank you." Sophie is stunned. She realizes that by sharing her vulnerability, she gave strength to someone else. This is the ultimate goal of language, to share humanity. Julian walks over to Sophie. He is holding a glass of orange juice. "Sophie," he says, and he sounds serious. "That was the best speech of the night." Sophie laughs. "Don't be silly, Julian. You were amazing. You were so funny." Julian shakes his head. "I was entertaining, yes, but you were real. I was just telling stories. You were teaching a lesson. I think I need to slow down a bit, too. I make so many mistakes because I rush. You inspired me to take my time. This moment is the resolution of our story. The hero and the rival are no longer competitors. They are peers. They are learning from each other." Sophie learns confidence from Julian. Julian learns patience from Sophie. This is the healthy way to view your classmates. They are not your enemies. They are your teammates. You are all on the same team, playing against the difficulty of the language. Now, let's zoom out from Sophie's story and bring this back to you, the listener. You have been listening to this series for a long time now. You have practiced your listening skills with thousands of words, but listening is passive. The real change happens when you take action. Sophie's story is a mirror. If you saw yourself in Sophie, that is good. It means you are ready to change. I want to summarize the English in Fluency Manifesto for you. These are the 5 pillars we have built together during this series. I want you to memorize them. I want you to write them down. Pillar number 1. Comparison is the thief of joy. Every minute you spend looking at someone else's garden is a minute you are not watering your own flowers. Your journey is unique because your life is unique. No one else has your combination of memories, interests, and needs. Therefore, your English path cannot look like anyone else's. Pillar number 2. Mistakes are data. They are not failures. When you make a mistake, your brain is testing a hypothesis. If you get it wrong, you adjust. If you never make mistakes, you are not learning. Embrace the error. Love the error. The error is your teacher. Pillar number 3. Communication over perfection. Sophie succeeded not because she was perfect, but because she was clear. If you can order a coffee, make a friend, or help a tourist, you are successful. Do not wait until you are ready to speak. You will never feel 100% ready. Speak before you are ready. Pillar number 4. Input must be compelling. Do not bore yourself into fluency. It won't work. Find the things you love, cooking, gaming, history, art, and consume them in English. Be a narrow listener first, then expand your pool. If you are having fun, you will not quit. Consistency is the only magic pill, and fun is the fuel for consistency. Pillar number 5. You are already enough. You do not need to be a native speaker to be valid. Your accent is your history. Your voice is your identity. Be a bilingual version of yourself, not a bad copy of someone else. So, what happens next for Sophie? Does she stop learning? No. The next day, she goes back to class. She still makes mistakes. She still forgets words. But the panic is gone. She knows that English is a lifelong companion. She decides to start a blog about design in English. It is small, and only her friends read it. But she is writing. She is using the language to create value. She is happy. And what happens next for you? That is the question I want to leave you with. Today is a new start. You can choose to be the frantic rabbit, worrying about every step. Or you can be the wise tortoise, moving forward with purpose and pride. I know which one I want you to be. I have a final task for you. This is the call to action for your own life. I want you to go to the comments section of this video or podcast right now. I want you to make a public declaration. I want you to write, I am focusing on my own journey. That is it. Just those words. I am focusing on my own journey. By writing it down, you are making a contract with yourself. You are joining a community of people who refuse to compare themselves. If you see someone else's comment, like it. Reply to them. Say, good luck. Let's build a community here that lifts people up, instead of tearing them down. We are all in this classroom together. If you found this series helpful, if Sophie's story resonated with you, please subscribe to English in Fluency. We have many more stories to tell, many more lessons to learn, and many more victories to celebrate. I am Alex, and it has been my absolute privilege to be your guide through this long listening practice. Remember, the goal is not to be the best in the world. The goal is to be the best for the world. Keep listening, keep speaking, and most importantly, keep believing in your own unique power. Until next time, take care of your English and take care of yourself. Goodbye for now.